Tonight, English mourning. King Charles III ascends to the throne as his mother, Queen Elizabeth's casket journeys from Scotland to England.
Plus, Ukraine pushes back.
I'm absolutely sure that we will win.
Ukrainians and Western military tech beating Russians on the battlefield.
And
I'm hopeful, yes.
The resilience of Afghan refugees. A year after the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, 21 years after the 9/11 attacks. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Pomp and circumstance on the world stage as the United Kingdom lays to rest in England's longest reigning queen. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Caitlin Burke.
And I'm Matt Gelka. Britain's newly crowned king tells of his mother's selfless duty as the world says goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II. The 96-year-old monarch, whose 70-year rule is the longest recorded reign of any woman head of state in history. The Queen's casket arriving today at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, part of a ceremonious journey south from Scotland and into England. Queen Elizabeth's 4 children walking behind her coffin in an emotional procession through her beloved Scotland.
King Charles III delivered remarks to the Scottish Parliament today after another address this morning to members of the English Parliament. Dale Hurd has more on the UK's long goodbye.
Britain's new king and queen consort met with members of Parliament before Charles III addressed the body this morning.
As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us.
Then traveling back to Scotland to join other members of the royal family for a procession to St. Giles Cathedral, where the Queen's casket will lie in state so the people of Scotland can pay their respects. The Queen's final journey began Sunday as the glass-windowed hearse left her Balmoral estate and traveled through the Scottish countryside.
Just important to say goodbye. She's been on the throne for a long time. Yeah, it means a lot.
Thousands lined her route to say goodbye.
She loved Ballater, she loved Royal Deeside, and we loved her as well.
Some threw flowers. There was even an honour guard of tractors.
It was the farming community doing their part to show their appreciation for what she'd done for agriculture.
Then a dozen horses paid tribute to the Queen as an equestrian. Charles is now head of state to 14 other nations, known as realms of the Commonwealth, including the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and a host of Caribbean and Pacific islands. But that may be changing. Antigua and Barbuda and Jamaica are now set to vote on whether to remove the British monarch as their head of state and become republics.
We are moving on as an independent, developed, prosperous country.
Barbados became independent earlier this year. The Queen's funeral will be held in Westminster Abbey on Monday, September 19th. President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden have accepted an invitation to attend. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, joining us now to discuss more about President Biden's plans to attend the Queen's funeral is our CBN News White House correspondent, Abigail Robertson. Abigail, what do we know about who will be going with President Biden?
Well, Matt, President Biden will travel along with the First Lady to attend the funeral next week at Westminster Abbey after they received that invitation from Buckingham Palace. But quite noticeably, the President and First Lady were not asked to bring a U.S. delegation with them, and it is not expected that any former U.S. presidents like Donald Trump or Barack Obama will be invited too due to space limitations. During her lifetime, the Queen met with 13 U.S. presidents, the last one being President Biden in June of 2021.
Abigail, before the president heads to the UK, he's traveling around the U.S., and the first stop was Boston. What can you tell us about his visit there this morning?
Well, Caitlin, today Biden was in Boston giving 2 speeches. The first was at Boston Logan Airport, which is receiving more than $60 million from that bipartisan infrastructure bill that will go towards much-needed improvements in the airport. And in this speech, Biden made the case that his economic policies are working for the American people, claiming claiming inflation is easing and gas prices are going down.
But the American people should have confidence that we're on the right track, that we're seeing real progress. We've worked to make sure our economy recovers, to lower costs for families, but we aren't stopping here.
This speech comes on the heels of Biden's Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warning gas prices could soon spike up again as the EU prepares to cease buying Russian oil. The Labor Department is also set to release the Consumer Price Index for August tomorrow morning, which will tell us if indeed inflation is increasing or slowing down. President Biden's second speech today focused on his goal of cutting the U.S. fatality rate from cancer in half over the next 25 years. The speech is being referred to as his Cancer Moonshot speech and falls on the 60th anniversary of President John F. Kennedy's Moonshot speech, where he outlined his goal to land a man on the moon. Caitlin, Matt.
Abigail, thank you. Former President Trump's legal team is urging a federal judge to reject the Justice Department's request to continue reviewing documents seized from his Mar-A-Lago home, claiming some of the secret materials may not be classified. Back and forth between the DOJ and the president's attorneys has seemingly halted the criminal investigation into the documents. That as the DOJ appeals a judge's ruling allowing for a so-called special master to help retain personal documents seized in the Mar-A-Lago raid. Even with that appeal in progress, both parties have submitted two proposed candidates to fulfill the role of a special master. So for more on this, we want to bring in Nathan Gonzalez. He's not a special master, but he is the editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us, as always. So tell me this. The documents seized by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, the investigation into that continues. Is this going to become a long, drawn-out legal drama like so many other issues we've seen with the former president? And from a political standpoint, does this help him?
Well, you're right that there's the legal and political angles to this. On the legal angle, I'll leave it to the lawyers about how much jeopardy the former president is in. It does seem like the more we learn about the process, or learn about the situation, the former president doesn't look great for him. But then there's the political. And while a long kind of drawn out legal process might normally benefit Trump in other cases, what it does in this case is it keeps him in the spotlight. It keeps him in the headlines. And I think that is bad for the Republican Party when it comes to these elections. Republicans want these midterm elections to be focused on Biden and gas prices and the economy, supply chain, crime, immigration. But right now, because Trump continues to be in the headlines with this investigation, it muddies the waters and it makes voters maybe think twice about voting for Republicans who have supported the former president.
Well, the economy is definitely getting the spotlight here a little bit. And this morning in Boston, President Biden spoke on the impact of his infrastructure bill, even as inflation continues to run rampant. Are the Democrats' legislative wins enough to carry them to victory in the midterms?
Well, I think it's more than just passing legislation. I think voters need to feel and see results in order for it to make a big impact. What's interesting about the infrastructure bill is that I think people are for more jobs. They're for the end result, probably, of these infrastructure projects. But as Americans, we hate construction, right? We complain about roads under construction, airports, things, because it is a hassle and an inconvenience. So the benefits, the political benefits or the actual benefits of something like the infrastructure bill might not come for another couple of years after we have one or two sets of elections behind us.
Well, Nathan, the president's delivering a major cancer moonshot speech tonight. It's an issue near and dear to his heart. And he's making those remarks from the John F. Kennedy Library in Boston, an obvious parallel to JFK's moonshot speech, pushing the U.S. to land a man on the moon. Is this another Democratic policy point that could win support from both sides of the aisle?
Well, if there's anything that can gain bipartisan support, it would be getting rid of cancer. I mean, I bet that every family has been affected by cancer or knows someone who's been affected by cancer in some form. And so this should be something we should all, that everyone should be able to get behind. What exactly that looks like and the effectiveness, and that's probably remains to be seen. But I think what we're seeing is President Biden looking at his legacy, not what is important to him, what's important to the country, and trying to look beyond at something bigger rather than the day-to-day partisan political fighting.
Real quickly there, Nathan, is there anything that can heal the divide that we're seeing in the country? We've got about 15 seconds.
15 seconds, Kaylin. I think it comes at an individual level. The most important thing, I think, is learning how to disagree with each other. It's not about agreeing on policies, but agreeing that we can have differing points of view and still live in community together.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez, you're a pro. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, guys.
Advanced technology is contributing to major victories for Ukraine on the battlefield. For example, one tiny drone has the combat power of a tank and can destroy hundreds of them.
Yeah, this high-tech strategy combined with military aid sent by the West is being credited for helping Ukraine retake more than 1,000 square miles of territory seized by Russia. Chuck Holton brings us the story from the front lines.
Ukrainians hope their military's counteroffensive in the east could signal a turning point in the war. The ongoing operation has been so successful, the Ukrainian army has retaken more ground in 5 days than the Russians captured in the past 5 months.
This operation was possible because of the resolve of the armed forces, because our commanders, from the president to every commander in the battlefield, are so devoted to the victory.
The city of Kharkiv has endured almost daily rocket attacks since April. On Sunday, a Russian missile strike took out the power grid, causing the city to go dark. It once held 1 million people, but is now relatively empty, and those who stayed live in constant fear of death from a Russian missile. Now, nearby villages feel hopeful as Ukrainian troops push the invaders out. Up until now, Russia has held a huge advantage in tanks and artillery, but the Ukrainians have figured out how to turn off-the-shelf technology into a force multiplier, making a commercial drone nearly equal to a Russian tank in combat power.
One of our soldiers with the technology, it's stronger than maybe 10 or 20 soldiers from Russia.
If you are unfamiliar with warfare, you might say that there was heavy fighting going on in this area where we are, in a place called Pisky in the southern part of Donetsk province. And though there have been artillery barrages going near constantly for the several hours that we've been here now, it doesn't necessarily qualify as a pitched battle. That's because the Russians are just randomly firing artillery pretty much all day long, all night long. They have a near limitless supply of that, but they're not really making any gains. And that's because the Ukrainians are fighting smarter. And in so doing, they can hold off the Russians, even though the Russians outnumber them about 50 to 1.
The technology now is good. When you have a mobile phone and you can fighting with the technology, this helps us to win.
A Russian tank costs about $4.5 million to build, while an off-the-shelf drone runs a little over $1,000. Since these tiny drones are responsible for destroying hundreds of tanks, that makes them priceless for these Ukrainian airborne troopers.
Rather than fight the Russian tanks head-to-head, we use the drones to spot the enemy positions, then pass that information on to our long-range artillery to be destroyed. The only thing we need is more ammo. If we had enough ammunition, the enemy wouldn't stand a chance.
Many of these drones and internet systems have been donated, courtesy of individuals giving to crowdfunding projects. For these troops who've been fighting without a break since the war began, it brings hope. They may soon get back to their loved ones.
I tell my girls, I love you so much, that's why I stay here. My oldest daughter said, Papa, did you get shot? And I said, no, the Russians don't have the budget for that this year.
I'm absolutely sure that we will win, but it's maybe not in this month, or maybe not to the end of this year, but it's as soon as possible. I'm absolutely sure that this is possible.
From the Donbass, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
A new home and a new hope. How refugees are rebuilding their lives here in America. Withdrawal from Afghanistan. Americans across the nation paused to remember the victims of the 9/11 attacks 21 years ago Sunday. Communities held tributes, pledging to never forget those who lost their lives that day, as well as those first responders who succumbed years later to illnesses contracted at the site. Relatives of the victims gathered at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the Pennsylvania field where Flight 93 crashed. First Lady Jill Biden addressed the crowds there.
9/11 touched us all. It changed us all, but it reminds us we can be a light in that darkness.
The president spoke at the Pentagon and the vice president at the World Trade Center site.
The 9/11 attacks drew America into a 2-decade-long war in Afghanistan. When President Biden pulled U.S. forces out of the country a year ago, thousands of Afghans fled, many ending up here in America.
While their roles in their home country were clear, here in the U.S. they've struggled to find their place. CBN's Gabe LaMonica spoke with 2 refugees in Alexandria, Virginia, working to build a better life far from home. Take a look.
The chaotic end to U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. Some 20 years after the 9/11 attacks, this image of people clinging to a U.S. military plane, now history.
I am Lakib.
In August 2021, Mobibi Aladodi joined the throng of thousands trying to flee Kabul airport. That forced Aladodi, like so many others, to leave everything behind, including much of her family, now in hiding from the Taliban.
It was not good for us because every Afghan have the same problem. It was security.
Aid workers like Maniza Azizi are helping these refugees build new lives.
I also came here as a refugee. It hit home for me.
At organizations like Homes Not Borders, pulling from stocked warehouses items a family might need for a new home.
I'm actually helping them find jobs. A lot of them are able to find jobs on their own if they've had that skill set.
Since that initial influx last summer, more than 76,000 Afghan nationals have formed a steady trickle into the U.S., with most relocated in communities across the country.
The folks that are not as lucky as are the doctors and the lawyers, because that's, as you know, you have to kind of start from scratch.
Among those starting from scratch, Sami Rouhani, a former Afghan Special Forces officer, now working as a waiter.
It's very hard for the soldiers.
Taking only these military patches while leaving his gun and uniform behind, Rouhani escaped with his wife and son. Back home, Rouhani's brother remains in hiding, unable to leave.
His life is in danger, now. Because of me, I was working with the US Army. Right now, he's not safe.
After years working side by side with American troops, Rouhani does not blame the U.S. for the Taliban takeover. He points to Afghanistan's own leaders.
I'm angry about my president. Why? I feel angry about all of the leadership of our country.
And rather than look back at dreams left behind, Rouhani looks forward.
I have a new dream. All of them is new. I was in Afghanistan Special Forces, but now I want to be a doctor. I want to make a good life in here also. Work hard for my family.
Dodi, too, shares that feeling while building a new life.
I am hopeful, yes.
Her resilience, like that of many other Afghan refugees, remains. Gabe LaMonica, CBN News.
Coming up, what was life like back in biblical times? Archaeologists uncover new clues when we come back.
Turning to the Middle East, for the first time, archaeologists have uncovered rare pieces of ivory from the Old Testament era of Israel's first temple.
As Julie Stahl reports from Jerusalem, it provides more clues about what life was like during that ancient time.
These decorative pieces help experts continue to put together the historic puzzle of Jerusalem from more than 2,500 years ago.
We found a complete corpus of small ivory plates, inlays that used to decorate large wooden furnitures, for example, beds or doors or something like that. It's the first time that are found here in Jerusalem or in Judea.
The discovery of some 1,500 tiny pieces happened at the sprawling City of David dig site in the ruins of a large palatial building that would have been in use as far back as 800 BC.
And it means that Jerusalem was an important city, that the elite of Jerusalem were people of high rank, important enough to communicate with their peers at the elite of Assyria and other places in the empire.
Israel Antiquities Authority archaeologist Yiftach Shalev says the items were most likely made outside of Israel.
It's a very delicate art. You need to remember that ivory is most probably one of the most prestige and most expensive items in the world, more expensive than gold. And only few people knew how to work with it.
Shalev says it's not clear how the ivory pieces arrived in Jerusalem.
They might come as part of trade, or even more likely came as gift between peer polity interaction. Maybe one of the elite families in Assyria gave these as gift for the local elite or something like that.
Shalev says the structure where the tiny fragments were discovered is historic in its own right.
We're digging one of the largest structures from the First Temple period ever to be found in Jerusalem. It had 2 stories. We found the house destroyed. It was burnt in huge fire, most probably during the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 586 BC.
Archaeologists also found seals in 15 broken jars that contained wine spiced with vanilla. Given these discoveries, Shalev says, it's clear the residents were part of elite Jerusalem and well connected to the royal family. Julie Stahl, CBN News, the City of David, Jerusalem.
Finally tonight, a somber tradition to honor first responders who sacrificed their lives on September 11th.
People across the country marked the day with a stair climb, remembering those who died running up the stairs of the Twin Towers, trying to rescue as many people as possible.
For the firefighters, it was 343 firefighters that lost their lives. Total of 412 first responders that ended up climbing the tower and just never came back. This climb is in their honor.
In Austin, Texas, those marking the day climbed a 25-story high tower. That's about 420 stairs. That tiring trek is just one of the ways Americans promise to never forget. It's hard to believe it's been 21 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight on Faith Nation.
We'll see you tomorrow.